KMAV AM, now known as KMSR AM, but KMAV AM went on the air October 20th, 1967. We've been talking to some different people that over the years were involved with KMAV or knew of KMAV, and right now we're talking to Dave Lee, who grew up in Hatton, and we'll talk about your career in a minute here, Dave, but understand you did some Hatton school programs and a few ball games for KMAV back in the day.
You know, I did, Dan, and congratulations on the anniversary. Of course, I remember as a little guy when the station was, doing a lot of the area games and a lot of things for the communities, and it was really vital. I'm so glad that after all these years, it's just as vital as it was back then, and it certainly had a great reputation then. And so congrats on everything you've done, by the way.
Well, appreciate that.
But the high school, the high school story, there was, when we were in high school, they used to do the high school news on Saturday mornings, as I recall, and each high school would come in for, I think, 15 minutes and just talk about what's going on. Maybe it was less than that. But they'd rotate Hillsboro, Mayville, Portland, Galesburg, whatever. So we came in to do ours, me and my friend Kim Smeston, and I think I delivered the news a little different than the rest did at the time, probably trying to be creative, which I'm sure at the time wasn't as creative as I perhaps thought it was. So when I came back the second time to do it, and our school rotated people, so, you'd send two from one class one weekend, and then, so I think like every 4 weeks or whatever. But when I came the second time, I was told that was the last time I'd be on. So it was... That was kind of an auspicious start to my career. But anyway, it was memorable, I'll put it that way. And knowing me back then, as we all are at that age, I'm sure I probably had it coming. So I must have done something stupid. But anyway, that was short-lived. And I believe I'm the only one doing high school news that got the axe.
Well, there you you can put that on your resume.
Yeah, well, I'd forgotten all about it until we were chatting, but anyway, it's fun now, but, at the time, I suppose I thought it was really great, and apparently it wasn't, so be it.
I think you, excuse me. I think you also told me you maybe did some Legion baseball games or something over the years here?
I did. I used to, every once in a while, I'd help out on a district tournament when they didn't either, the bodies were stretched thin, as you know, doing a game here, a game there, and for some reason, but they asked me back when I was, I think, working in East Grand Forks at KRAD part-time, and Everett Thorson was a salesman there, a sales manager perhaps, and his brother, I think, was the doctor in town. But Everett was a wonderful man. He was so proud of working at KMAV and was so delightful to be around. And one of those people with the energy and this positivity that, I think we all wish we had, where people are kind of attracted to you and just want to talk to you. That's the kind of guy Everett was, and he was so out of his way nice to me, and he asked me to fill in and do some ball games in the summer, and of course going up at the conference and playing baseball, I automatically knew some of the names from the past, the kids that were there, because as you know, in a small town, everybody pretty much 30 to 40 years either side of your age, and it was fun. So yeah, I did some games. I'm trying to think who was my analyst on some of those. I think my buddy Deacon Twangy, who's a baseball coach up here at Minnetonka High School in the Twin Cities now, I think did some with me. But yeah, it was a blast. Those are great memories.
And you were part of Hatton's rich baseball tradition over the years.
Yeah, we had baseball was the deal. As you know, every town has something, and I think in those years that we were winning state championships, first time for Hatton, and they were broadcast on KMAV. Then I think Mayville Portland was winning one of their first championships. I remember Curtis Strand was their quarterback, and Bradley was on that. Jeff Strand was on that team, and Jeff. Anyway, there were. I'm trying to think of names now, but so we had in the conference we had pretty good athletics between football and basketball, which I think Mayport won when I was back there, and then we were winning the baseballs, and yeah, it was fun. We had a good run, and it was pretty cool because KMAV would always pay attention to that and would make sure that we've got broadcasting. Forgive me for pausing here. I'm actually we're turning the vehicle as I'm speaking, but
that's all right.
We anyway, KMAV was a big part of that growing up because that was a lifeblood not only for community stuff but also for the sports. So that was fun. And then coming back from Hatton, I remember the first one we won was out in Velva, and it was so cold that day, Dan, and you know this well, broadcasting all those years in different venues. It was so cold for the state championship game in Velva, just outside of Minot, that our water bucket was frozen solid with ice.
I can believe that, yeah.
And that was Coach Housen's very first state championship and our very first state championship, and I was a freshman on that team, and then we went on to win a few more. But it was just, I think, part of being in that conference because you kind of had to keep up to compete. And I think everybody around there from Mayville, and, one time Mayville and Portland were apart, of course, when I was younger. I think everything just made you a little bit better because you had pretty good competition in that Red River Valley Conference.
Well, yeah, between Hatton and Mayville and Portland and Hillsboro and the other towns around here, I would imagine just about every sport was a battle to try to win.
Yeah, and as you know, I went on to become friends with Ed Beyer. So Eddie was coaching, of course, when I was a kid. And I'll never when he was coaching against you, I'm not sure we liked him very much, but when I got to know him, I really enjoyed him. And we would go to some Twins games here with our good buddy Dan Allen and a few other people that would come down and go to the games every summer. I'd see him at Gopher basketball back when I was doing that. But Eddie, I remember one game at Louis Lee Fieldhouse at Mayville State College. It was, I wonder if it was either a district championship or a regional championship. I can't recall, but it was Mayville, the Lions, and the Hulda boys against Hillsboro. Bill McLean, Bill Coring, Gary Ureen, and Steve Letness and that whole group. And I think the final score, I got to think about it, was like 6-5 in double overtime.
Wow.
And Eddie's team was favored, but Mayville went into that four-corner stall. And I think Bill McLean likes to tell me, he told me a few times that he was the leading scorer in that game with 2 points.
That's crazy.
That was Eddie's. Yeah, so, and KMAV, of course, was there, I'm sure, doing that game at the time. But it was 6-5, I think was the final score. I'd have to double-check with those guys. But I know it was Hillsboro against Mayville, and before Mayport, and Mayville had those black and white uniforms, and they were the Mayville Lions. But the Hulda boys were two big kids that kind of were two of the stars of that team.
All right. Yeah, I think it was 72 when they became Mayville Portland. Mayport's, I think is when they called it.
And I think, and I wonder if they did win the state basketball
Yeah, they did. Ken DeMeester coached them to the state title that year.
Yep, Kenny. I remember playing against Kenny, and but the conference was great. Northwood was in the conference, I think, at the time, as I recall. Yeah, they were. And it was a special time, but I think it made it even more because here comes KMAV all of a sudden, and every team's relevant because you can hear games on the radio and you can hear a little bit more about these other teams that you would never really hear. So I just think that was a great niche that was carved out there, and it's just really rewarding to see you broadcasting and being as strong as ever in a day and age when it's, that could have easily not happened.
I believe Bob Brown was doing some games back then, wasn't he?
Oh, Bob Brown from Mayville State College. Geez, good deep track. Yes, great guy. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, Bob was a wonderful guy. Nice man. Who wasn't back home, right?
What's that?
I said everybody back home was a good person.
Oh, of course they were. That's what makes the stories greater over the years, right?
Yeah, Bob Brown. Yeah, boy, I'm glad you mentioned that. That's a good memory right there. Yeah, nice man.
So obviously you've had a long radio career and started, I guess, doing school news for Hatton, and then you went on to what, KRAD, which has had a few different call letters over the years, but that was in East Grand Forks.
Yeah, I went to school up in North Dakota, and then I worked part-time there and ended up, and that's where I think I got to know you originally, and Lee Halverson and Jerry Rogers, and just, boy, we were blessed with some great broadcasters, and I've said this before, it's certainly not being patronizing, but I thought Gary Rogers was awesome. I thought Lee Halverson was good. Dan Keating was good, and we had, and of course, Dwayne Santa was a big part of that, as you know, and there were some really good announcers, and that area was getting, North Dakota and Minnesota were getting a lot of great coverage on high school athletics from a lot of guys that were really good broadcasters. So it was nice to grow up into that atmosphere as well.
Yeah, unfortunately, we lost Gary Rogers this summer.
I heard that. I'm so sorry I didn't know that when it was happening. He was a wonderful guy and a great mentor to me back years ago, and I just really enjoyed seeing Gary, but I always admired his broadcasting too. So, yeah, all those years at Wahpeton and doing Wahpeton and Breckenridge. And,
yeah, he'd been there, and he started there back in the 60s when I was just a little shaver back when he would I would have back in Minnesota when he started broadcasting here. But, yeah, he was a great man and had a brain tumor, and it didn't take long, and he passed on.
Boy, well, at least Gary left a nice legacy, and I still think about the guy. And you really treasure those moments. I think when you're growing up and you're young guys in the business, you're just trying to figure everything out, and then you realize, you got a lot of people around you can learn from, and he was one of those guys.
Oh, yeah.
And of course,
that's the great thing. I remember when I started in KBO in Bemidji, I was going to Bemidji State, and I got to work there part-time, and I think I learned more in the first 2 days I went there to work part-time than I did my whole time in class, because these guys, they show you what to do.
Oh, yeah, and you and I had to figure all the equipment out and where to plug it in, and half the time there might not have been a phone line there. So a lot of times you learned on the job, or you're doing the game from the scaffolding in the wind and rain, and it's all fun stuff to think about, but it made a difference, I think.
Of course, you were at KFGO for a number of years.
Yeah, I think I was there for a decade. I think I was there for 10 years. So I got married there in Fargo, and then the truth be known, that's why I took a job in Fargo, because my bride was there. So I'm not smart enough to look out into the future and think what I should have been doing. But luckily, and I was blessed, and got a nice break there and worked there, and then moved out here to Minneapolis in what year was that? 89, I guess.
Okay. I think Olaf Harvey was born in KFGO, wasn't he?
A great story about that. Yeah, Olaf Harvey was at KFGO, and that was a parody of Paul Harvey. And I got to meet Paul, and he was well aware of the show, and he was very complimentary, and he was very kind. I really didn't know how he would feel about it, because he was an intimidating guy and a wonderful vocabulary and a terrific presence. And we hit it off wonderfully. But I remember when I started the bit, and I'm Norwegian, like most of us in Hatton were and are, and my dad spoke Norwegian, of course, right up until the day he died, and he had a great sense of humor. So a lot of that was based on my dad's sense of humor, but a lot of it was topical. It wasn't Norwegian jokes. It was topicality on news events. And I remember coming home for Thanksgiving one year. My brothers were there, and my dad at dinner suddenly said, "You wouldn't do that to your heritage. You're certainly not that Olaf Harvey guy, are you?" And my brothers start laughing, and of course they know better. And he was not thrilled that I would be what he perceived initially as making fun of my heritage. But in fact, I said, "Pa, what I'm doing," I said, "I have an opportunity to do jokes on everything and everybody." And I said, "So it certainly isn't." But right away was not a fan. But after after a year or two, I caught him wearing an Olaf Harvey T-shirt and hat one time, so I knew it was okay after a while.
One of my favorite characters you always had on there was Bing from Crosby.
Yeah, it was fun. I really enjoyed doing that, and it got a little larger than I don't think we anticipated. It would be quite the thing it was, but it was fun. And one of those bits, it's all by accident, but it's part of it's all from Hatton. I got to be honest. You grow up with that Scandinavian background, and you're actually at Hatton School at that time, Dan. This might turn your stomach, but we used to have lutefisk for hot lunch. I don't know, 2-3 times a year maybe. I got to think about that. But you'd walk into school that morning at 8 o'clock or whatever time we started, 8:40, and you could smell.
You could smell the lutefisk cooking.
Yeah, so that's when you make quick choice to go home and eat that day if you could.
Or but if you knew it was coming, bring the sack lunch for school that day. And
oh boy, I can't imagine many schools did that, but I do recall we did that a few times. So anyway, so growing Olaf Harvey was a product of Hatton, and that's all there was to it. So.
Of course, you've been at CCO, and you got to check. Said you did Gophers. I believe you're still doing the Minnesota basketball tournaments on TV, aren't you?
Yeah, I did. We did when I came up here. Then I did. I used to fill in for the Twins for about 4 or 5 years. I've been hosting the morning show for 20-some years, and I love that. And I love it when I can fill in and do sports here and there. So when they came to me and asked if I do the Gophers, I said, well, I don't know. If you'll let me do the mornings and the Gophers, I'll do it. So football was not a problem, but basketball was a problem because, you go on the road for a couple of nights a week and you'd miss the morning show. And frankly, the revenue comes in on the morning show and not the basketball game. So they just decided a few years ago to not carry Gophers anymore, which of course I'm working for CBS, so I'm not going anywhere. And but then also I started doing the TV tournaments for basketball and football and so that was nice. So you have sports. There were some nice opportunities in the sports world, but I just working the morning show and doing sports part time it doesn't get much better than that for me. I just love it.
I understand through the Plaidson boys that you and Coach Twenge get back here once in a while to do some fundraisers for Hatton baseball.
Yeah, we used to do a thing pretty much every summer, and we go. One of the things that happens because of particularly sports is you get to meet a lot of people, and so we get things signed and have a chance to get a lot of memorabilia and go back and raise money for the programs and Ricky and Tigger. I call Clyde Plaidson Tigger. Still do since he's a little guy. He's not so little anymore. I know you've seen him. But anyway, so we'd raise some money for our hometown because it was just fun for us. We appreciated growing up where we did. We loved growing up where we did, and we had an opportunity to bring back some dough. In fact, I think one year we had a 9/11 jacket that was signed by President Bush, if you can believe that we got. So stuff like that. Yeah, that's a kick. That was fun. So we did that for a number of years, and then we come back and play a baseball game all the time on our own. No crowd to watch us because there wasn't much to see. But we'd get a big baseball thing going every summer just before that fundraiser. So yeah, it was a blast. We haven't done it now in a couple of years.
Yeah, it's always fun. The folks in Hatton are always great people, and I'm sure you love getting back when you get the chance.
Oh yeah, it was the City of Action. We used to have the bumper stickers as kids that said City of Action, and there was always something going on. They always had a celebration of some kind, and of course the big deal when I was a kid was we had the drive-in theater in Hatton. So you get kids from Findlay and Sharon, Mayville, Portland, Clifford, Galesburg, Northwood, maybe even some cases Larimore, Buxton, Reynolds, and they would all come over and hang out at the theater on a Saturday night or a Sunday night. And of course, I don't know how many people ever saw the movie, but it was it was a big deal before social media. That's where you got to know a lot of the guys, a lot of the friends that you grew up with, played against, and Hatton was always kind of that area where something was going on. So the people, my dad's era and guys like Russell Plaidson, who's the dad to Tigger and Ricky, those were the guys, those people were organizing stuff all the time, so they kept us hopping. So yeah, it's fun to go back. I love growing up there, and I just wish I owned some farmland.
I hear you.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, Dave, we appreciate you taking the time. Been a lot of fun.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. Again, congratulations on everything. I just think that's remarkable and fun, and that you and I, who kind of keep our eye on this media business, knows that it's not always easy and it requires a lot of work. And I'm just applauding you for what you've done there in Mayville all these years. That's really a cool story.
We appreciate it, and I always like to listen to you when I get a chance to get down to the cities or when you're doing those Minnesota tournaments. So keep up the good work there, too. We appreciate that.
Yeah, thanks. Those are still a lot of fun. I still remember, in fact, I'll tell you a brief story. I'll bore you with this one, but when I did the very first one on TV a number of years ago, and I actually said, no, I don't want to do them, and I'm not sure what happened, but I ended up doing them, which is fun. You're certainly not doing it for the money. It's just a kick to do it. But after the first game, or first day, I did a couple of Jim Adelson lines, and you and I both remember Jim.
Yes, of course, you bet.
And I said, one roll, no coffee, Katie bar the door. He's doing everything out there but selling popcorn. And then I used those lines, and on the way home, because Jim at the time lived in Arizona, I called him. And I said, Jim, all these years I grew up listening to you and watching you do the TV tournaments. I want you to know that tonight I was doing your lines, your catchphrases in honor of you and tribute to you. And you know how tough and hard Jim was. And he broke down on the phone and started crying. And it was just the coolest feeling in the world. Well, then shortly thereafter, I get an email from an area coach who grew up in North Dakota, football coach down here, very successful, and he sends me a note kind of chiding me for stealing Jim Adelson's lines. So I quickly said him, I responded to him, and I said, hey, here's why I did it, and blah, blah, blah. And then everything was okay after that. But he was, obviously, I wasn't the only one that picked up on a lot of those old cliches.
Well, you know, everybody has their line, and sometimes you got to borrow some people's lines just to make the game go, too.
Yeah. Well, as you know, when it's a tough game to watch, you got to start ad-libbing.
Oh, you got to see when it gets to be about a 40-point difference or something. Yeah, you got to come up with about anything and everything you can.
Yeah, that's when you find out if somebody's prepared to do the broadcast.
Dave, again, thanks very much. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. It's nice. I appreciate letting me be on and
Very good.
And not firing me.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Dave.
Yep. See ya.